Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Goddess Temple Oracle cards from Lo Scarabeo. So this is a deck that I actually kind of purchased on a whim because I was thinking about doing a goddess deck video, and so I just went on Amazon and was kind of looking at some different goddess decks just to kind of see what else was out there that I didn't already have. And I stumbled across this particular deck and I thought, that's interesting. I have not seen this one before. The box is upside down. So it is a book and 44 card oracle deck. Now, I've already looked through this deck because, to tell you the truth, this deck is completely fascinating to me. So it does come in this really lovely two-piece box. The production value on this deck for a mass market deck, I think, is pretty fantastic. The box itself has a linen finish, and it's absolutely beautiful. The cards, unfortunately, do not. They are glossy, but we have the nice ribbon in the box here, and the cards sit inside. Here is our beautiful back, and of course, as you can see, catching all the lights, they are quite glossy. But the box is stunning with its linen finish. It's kind of matte linen finish. I wish the cards would have been matte and or linen finish. But it's a fascinating little deck, and we are going to take a look at the cards, but I want to sort of do it in conjunction with the structure of the deck itself, because this deck actually does have a fairly significant structure to it for an oracle deck. So before we dive in, this is a Lo Scarabeo deck. So the guidebook, while it is a nice little guidebook, is actually only in English in the first little bit of it. So we have this whole chunk here is a total of 6 languages in this particular guidebook. Looks like, I guess it is a new deck because it was released last year in 2020. So it's by Sarah Perini and Elena Albanese. I may be totally pronouncing that wrong. Elena is the artist of this deck. So you can see here that there's not a ton in this little section of this guidebook, but this deck has a really fascinating structure to it. So before we jump into the cards, we're going to do things a little bit different today. I want to kind of go through the structure a little bit with you and what the purpose is of this deck, because I think it will help to make sense of the cards as they come up. So it says, this deck aims to be a tool to get to know the faces of the one and multiform goddess, her energies, her elements and archetypes, starting from the associations with the Avalon Wheel of the Year, the culture of Avalon and ancient Europe, the matricentric cultures that honored and honor the mother goddess, and the Celtic and Proto-European traditions. This experience is dedicated to all those whose desire is to embrace these themes and these experiences. So I went into this purchasing this deck because I didn't actually look into it very, very carefully, thinking that this was just going to be another basic goddess oracle. But this is very much centered in Avalonian tradition, which is really interesting. It really does focus on the goddess as the great mother, the triple goddess, the divine feminine archetype, and we'll see that throughout this deck. So it says, the goddess in all her manifestations, she is the symbol of unity of all the life forms existing in nature. Her power lies in water and stone, in tombs and in caves, in animal and birds, in fish, in snakes and fish, and in the hills, trees, and flowers. The male deities of vegetation also belong to this category of symbols. She is fate itself, which gives life, determines its span, and takes it back when the time comes, because she controls the length of the life cycle. So you'll see here that all of those elements are represented in this deck. But again, they're tied back into that overarching goddess energy. So we have a little bit about the traditions of the ancient Proto-European peoples, the culture of Avalon, which is the primary focus of this deck. And we have the Wheel of the Year as it relates to that tradition. So each section or each spoke of the wheel is related to a specific goddess, and we'll take a look at each of those as we go through. So now we're going to go into the structure of the Oracle deck itself, and that's actually how I want to explore this deck. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at each of the sections in detail. So we're going to begin with the goddesses of the wheel. So this is the goddess in all her forms and expressions as we travel through the wheel of the year. So we begin with Caradwyn, with the goddess of Samhain, the pagan holiday of the night between the 31st of October and the 1st of November, the season of the passage to the other world when the veils between the worlds are thin. So here we have Kalish, the goddess of Yule, the pagan holiday of the winter solstice. Next we have Brigid with the goddess of Imbolc, the pagan holiday of February 1st to the 2nd, the period of awakening of the first fire contained under the earth after the long winter. Next we have Artha with the goddess of Ostera, the pagan festival of the spring equinox. Here we have Rhiannon for the goddess of Beltane, the pagan holiday of May 1st, the season of love and the encounter between the feminine and the masculine. Here we have Dominu, the goddess of Litha, the pagan festival of the summer solstice, season of the flowing of waters related to the emotion, feelings, and contents of the unconscious. So here we have Ker with the goddess of Lammas, the pagan holiday of midsummer, season of harvest, abundance, and warmth of the sun. So here we have Babana, the goddess of Mabon, the pagan holiday of the autumn equinox, season of the second harvest, and the time of year when light and shadow are in balance. And at the center of the wheel, we have the Lady of Avalon. She is the goddess without a name and with 1,000 names, who gives and takes her name from the land Avalon. So next we find the 4 cards of the archetypes of the sacred feminine. So we have the Maiden with goddess of the joyful smile, of the new beginnings, awakening, joyful, exuberant, and free. Then we have the Lover, a flowery face, a snake woman who has full self-consciousness. We have the Mother with nourishing and generous, the mature woman who loves, supports, and welcomes. And finally, we have the Crone, the old woman, the wise, the one who transforms, and the Lady of Death. Next, we have the 4 cards of the archetypes of the sacred masculine. We start with the magical and youthful hero. He'll lead you to explore the initiation experience of the boy and the youth who will become a man. We have the lover, the inner partner with the eternal creative dance between complementary polarities. He will lead you on the path of understanding the difference between imposed power and shared power and respect for the earth's natural sovereignty and its rules. Next, we have the creative, the adult man, the companion chosen by the goddess in her aspect of queen, from whom he receives sovereignty and is called upon as king to share the power that is responsibility and wisdom. Finally, we have the wise, the elder of the clan, master of wisdom, magician, strategist, teacher, lord of time, the farsighted man of vision, able to practice and transmit the rules of the healthy village. So next we have the 4 temple of the elements. We have the temple of air with sacred space of clarity of vision, freedom, responsibility, and intuition. We have the temple of fire, the sacred space of creativity, transformation, passion. We have the temple of water with a sacred space of deep emotions, shimmering lights, and shadows of the abyss of consciousness. And finally, we have the temple of earth, the sacred space of the cave in the belly of Mother Earth, illuminated and heated by torches. So in the last grouping of cards, we have the Cauldron of Transformation. In the Goddess's Cauldron of Transformation, we can allow her to touch us, change us, and reblend us through the challenges and experiences that we manifest in our lives, consciously involved in creating together with her. So we have the Traveler here. This is the card of the Querent, the person who is experiencing the consultation. We have Centering with recall the importance of grounding and centering practices before embarking on this journey. Here we have rebirth with discover the cycles of birth, death, and transformation. We have the fire dream with recall the importance of flame of creative, vital, and sexual energy, which runs through us as human beings. We have the water gift with bring the gift of water to dry areas of the earth and let your emotions flow. We have blessings, honor your sisters and brothers with your words. We have the mirror with know, observe, accept, and transform your shadows and lights. We have the vision. Through the gift of psychic vision, we can activate our active imagination. We have the dance with reactivate your body memory through movement and offer your creative energy to the goddess. We have gratitude, learn to give and receive thanks and to ritualize the act of thanking. We have initiation for understand that initiation is the point of departure and not the point of arrival along your path of spiritual growth. We have the inner child with welcome and listen to the child within you, rediscover the sources of creativity, enthusiasm, and vital energy. We have the other world, recognize the infinite possible worlds, the physical and the subtle worlds, and the possibility of organization. We have the owl tower to find a quiet place where you can collect your thoughts in meditation and experience isolation and peace. We have the dark cave for face your fears, bring light with the fiery and enlightened torch of the goddess. We have the labyrinth with build and consciously experience the paths of transformation. We have surrender with let go of resistance, fears, and pain. Put your trust in yourself, in others, and in life. We have the journey with live life as a wonderful inner or outer journey according to your intention. We have the seeding for sow a precise intention at the right time of year. We have the harvest for grant yourself the right to harvest results and receive abundance. We have the moon maiden to discover the lunar cycles and the very cycles of nature, the rites of passage in human life. We have the shapeshifter with learn the art of adaptability and the ability to incorporate elements, characteristics, and energies of nature. We have the Selkie with recognize the parts of you that you have denied and trust in your worth. And finally, we have the allies to recognize your allies and ancestors and rediscover your roots. So really interesting that we have a very set structure in this deck. We have the 8 spokes of the wheel and their related goddesses represented here, as well as the center of the wheel with the Lady of Avalon. Again, this deck does follow an Avalonian tradition, which was not something I was aware of when I purchased it, but I'm quite pleased to see it. We have the 4 aspects of the feminine divine with the maiden, the lover, the mother, and the crone. And then we also have the 4 aspects of the masculine divine with the young, the lover, the creative, and the wise. And these particular ones are represented by archetypes within that same tradition. We have the 4 temples of the elements with air, fire, water, and earth. And then finally, we have the stages of transformation with the different aspects and elements that we need to tap into. So really fascinating structure in this deck. I'm really kind of curious to see how it works out. For each of the cards, like I said, there's not a lot in this little guidebook. I have kind of picked out some of the key elements. As I mentioned before, we have the culture of Avalon. We have the Wheel of the Year here. This is where you will find the information pertaining to the goddesses and the Wheel of the Year, but there is also a little bit about each. These are the other sections that we talked about: the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, and the cauldron of transformation. Here it talks a little bit about asking questions, and we have a wheel spread or a direction spread here. So here we actually have the sort of oracle message for the cards. So here we have the oracle message for the cards of the goddess of the wheel, for the archetypes of the sacred feminine, the archetypes of the sacred masculine. And you can see I didn't read everything that was in here. I was just kind of picking out key elements, the 4 temples, and then all the cards of the cauldron of transformation. And then we go into the other languages. So really small bit of information here. But I think that if you're familiar with these energies, I don't know that you would necessarily need a ton of information about each one. However, if this was a newer path for you, then you might need to kind of dive into some additional resource materials for this. So I was just kind of curious of what types of readings that it kind of suggests. So it does suggest using the deck for meditation, for grounding and centering, which I think would be really wonderful. You just pull a card and kind of meditate and center on it. It talks about using it for shamanic journeying, and then of course for divination. So for this one, you would pull out the 3 cards for her 3 aspects for Maiden, Mother, and Crone, and then place them on your altar and proceed with the reading from there. I could definitely see these being used for altar cards for sure. And then it also suggests doing a 9-card reading on the Wheel of the Year. You basically pull out each of the goddesses for each of the 9 spokes, well, for each of the 8 spokes of the year, plus the 9th card of the Lady of Avalon in the center. And then I assume at that point you could actually overlay it with the Path of Transformation cards. So you can see I've actually flipped through this little book quite a bit already. So it's been quite an interesting little book. It is very little. It doesn't have a ton of information in it, but I think it's what's there is very useful. So what I'm kind of curious about is how one might actually use this in a reading. Because initially, as I mentioned, I just thought it was like your typical goddess oracle, right? It was just going to be a whole deck of goddesses. But what we have here is actually a deck that kind of follows the Wheel of the Year, has the feminine and masculine aspects, and then the cards for the Path of Transformation. I am thinking that you could definitely do some interesting readings with pulling out specific cards, either for the season that you're in, and then maybe for the aspect that you want to tap into, and then pull your cards for the transformation, the Path of Transformation. I think that would be really interesting. But what I'm kind of interested to see, so say we wanted to pull a, reading for Samhain here, we're going to pull out Cerdwin, and maybe because it's Samhain, we want to tap into the crone aspect for the divine feminine and the wise aspect for the divine masculine. And I'm going to end up getting these all mixed together, but then at this point, maybe we give the Path of Transformation a little shuffle, and maybe we see what we need to focus on there, what our path needs to be. Maybe we can see what our path needs to be for both the masculine and the feminine. So I think this would be a really interesting way to work with it. So for the crone, we would have going into the dark cave. And for the green man, we'd have the dance. So that's really interesting, right? That could definitely be a great way to sort of tie this into a seasonal practice by really focusing in on the seasonal aspect of the cards, tapping into that divine feminine, that divine masculine. Each season does have a sort of aspect of the feminine and masculine that you could definitely pull these particular cards out. If we wanted to do, say, Brigid for Ostara, and then we wanted to do, the maiden for the feminine aspect, and the youth for the masculine, and then we would pull out our path cards. So for the maiden, we would have centering. And for the youth, we would have the labyrinth. So I could definitely see this working into some seasonal spreads really beautifully. I think that would be really interesting to do. What I'm also kind of interested to see, and I am just going to mix them all together now, although I may end up taking them back apart, just to have those different aspects kind of separated out so I can work with them intentionally. But the other thing that I'm thinking might be really great would be to see how you might be able to just use them as a more traditional oracle and pair them with some tarot decks. So as I was kind of looking through things and flipping through the deck the first time and kind of getting myself familiar with it in the guidebook, I was thinking about the tarot decks that I might be interested in pairing with, and I actually came up with like 4 or 5 of them. So we're gonna basically just do a couple of card combos and see how this deck actually works, is just using it as a sort of just basic oracle, not really setting out any cards for intention or not pulling specific cards for specific energies, just kind of letting the deck overall serve as an oracle deck, and we'll probably use it as a center focus for our reading. So the first pairing that immediately came to mind as soon as I saw this artwork was Tarot of the Hidden Realm. I feel like the artwork on these decks is super compatible. They do have not only a similar art style, but I feel like they have also kind of the same sort of energy to them. They're both more into that sort of Celtic-y, fae kind of realm, and I think that they just pair absolutely beautiful together. So let's take a look here. We have Cernunnos with the Creative, the 4 of Pentacles, and the Fortune Fairy. How beautiful is that? I love the way these decks actually look together. I have not done any of these pairings before, so these will be all new for me as well. I am not loving the glare that I'm getting off these decks because they are both very glossy decks, but they do look absolutely beautiful together. So here we have Blessing as our central message, surrounded by the 5 of Pentacles and the Queen of Wands. How beautiful. I just had this feeling that this artwork would be really cohesive together, and I am so pleased to see that it is. They do feel very much like they inhabit the same world, and so I think that this would be a beautiful pairing to work with together. How about this one here? We have the Seating with the Empress and the Page of Pentacles. I love the play of colors between these decks, and again, it just, that art style just feels so spot on. It's so cohesive. I mean, I almost feel like they could have been created by the same artist. They are that compatible. Look at how beautiful. We have the Fire Dream between the Ace of Swords and the Star. Gorgeous. They make for just so beautiful on the table, but I feel like the readings would probably be really spot on too, that there would be a lot of cohesion between these decks. So again, that's the Goddess Temple paired with the Tarot of a Hidden Realm. So the next deck that I thought that this Goddess Temple might pair well with is the Forest of Enchantment Tarot. Is it the Forest of Enchantment or the Enchanted Forest Tarot? I always forget. I think it's the Forest of Enchantment. Again, these decks feel like they inhabit the same kind of world. Here, look at this. We have the Temple of Air with the 2 of Spells and the 4 of Spells. How beautiful is that? While the art style isn't quite as spot on as maybe it is with the Hidden Realms, I do feel like it's very compatible. I feel like they do inhabit the same kind of space, the same world. Very much a storybook quality to both of them, so I think they work really beautifully together. So here we have the Owl Tower. That was kind of the Hermity card, right? The Going Within. So we have the 5 of Visions and the Folly around it. Interesting. So here's our actual Hermit card going into the dark cave, embodying that hermit and being the weaver of your own words. I love that. Beautiful. Look at the centering between the Huntsman and the Keeper of Challenges. Very interesting cards. Surrender with the 3 of Boons and the 10 of Visions. Look at that one. The colors are really cohesive too in these 2 decks, which I think is always really beautiful. Stunning. Okay, last one, I promise, because I could sit here and do this all day. So again, that was the Goddess Temple paired with the Tarot of an Enchanted Forest, or the Enchanted Forest Tarot. I can never remember which it is. So another deck that I thought would be really interesting to pair with it is actually the Modern Spellcasters Tarot, because for me, this deck has a very masculine energy to it. And I feel like the Goddess Temple, of course, being a goddess deck, it has a very feminine energy to it. Even though we do have those divine masculine cards, I think we definitely have a more feminine energy coming through in this deck. And I thought it would be really interesting to pair it with a deck that, for me, feels more in the masculine realm. Still, again, kind of inhabiting that same storybook world, but kind of bringing a little bit more of that masculine energy in and bringing a little bit more balance to the reading. So here we have the Crone with the Knight of Wands and the 8 of Swords. So again, I think we're going to have a lot of cohesion between the colors and the artwork in these 2 decks, but I was really curious to see how that bringing in a little bit more masculine energy would help kind of balance out the readings. And I think that that's kind of beautiful the way that it is doing that. And I think that the conversation these decks are having is quite beautiful. So here we have Caradwyn with our 8 of Cups and our Page of Wands. Look at this one with our Temple of Fire, our Emperor, and our 10 of Pentacles, really stepping into our own internal power in order to kind of cultivate that world that we're looking for. Beautiful. We have 2 majors here. So we have the Young between the Magician and the Moon. Very interesting combination there. Again, I think the colors, the artwork, I think they're really compatible. I think they look beautiful together. But what I kind of like about this particular pairing in comparison to the other 2 that we've seen so far is just bringing in a little bit more of that masculine energy, just to bring a little bit more balance to the reading itself. And I think that it works really beautifully for that. So here we have the Mirror with the 7 of Cups and the King of Pentacles. So here we have a Water Gift with the Wheel of Fortune and the 2 of Pentacles. Definitely some bringing things into balance energy going on there. So again, that is the Goddess Temple Oracle paired with the Modern Spellcasters Tarot. So the next pairing that I thought would be interesting to check out is the Goddess Temple with the Anna K. So this one, different to kind of the others that we've seen so far, where it was more kind of about tapping into similar energy. I feel like these 2 are kind of pulling at are kind of coming at it and pulling in 2 different ends of the spectrum. So I feel like the Goddess Temple is more about sort of that inner world, that inner development, and then we have the Anna K sort of representing the outer world. And so I thought that might be a fascinating kind of pairing of what's going on within me and what's going on outside of me. I tend to use the Anna K for this a lot because it is kind of devoid of all the kind of magic and esoterica that we tend to see in a lot of decks. And it's really more grounded into the mundane and into the real world, so to speak. And I thought pulling in those opposite energies might actually work really beautifully. And now that I kind of see them on the table together, I think they do work quite well. I'm actually thinking maybe my trimmed Anna K that doesn't have any of the borders might have been a better choice, but this was just the one that I grabbed. So here we have the Maiden, that's the internal energy. And then what is going on the outside of us, we have the 3 of Rods and the 4 of Pentacles. One of the things I love about the Anna K is the way that it does kind of tap into that mundane world. And a lot of times I like to pair it with my more sort of cosmic ethereal or sort of story magical type of decks, because it does kind of bring those two energies together. And it also does really well of kind of exploring what's going on in the world around us, whereas these types of decks really for me are more about exploring the inner self. And so I think that they work really well for that. So here we have Temple of Earth with the Ace of Pentacles and the Star. Here we're getting that very much being in the earth, you know, digging deep into self, but also remembering that we are a part of something larger than ourselves. I think that's beautiful. So this was a little bit of an interesting one that I thought I would just try out to just kind of see how it would work together. But I think it does actually work quite well. And I think it brings a totally different sort of energy to the reading itself, kind of an inner and outer, you know, kind of what's going on within me versus what's going on in the world around me. And I think that's quite beautiful. So kind of along those same lines, but just kind of tapping into a little bit of a different sort of energy and artwork, I thought maybe that same kind of idea might work well with the Robin Wood Tarot. So the Robin Wood Tarot, similar to the Anna Kay for me, has a little bit more of that into the mundane kind of energy. It is definitely more of a pagan inspired deck, so I think it fits quite well with the energy of the Goddess Temple overall. But again, it feels more like that sort of what's going on within and what's going on without. And I think that these two decks kind of do similar together as the Anna Kay did, where we're really looking at what's going on within us. So here we're in the space of the mirror, and what's going on around this. We have the conflict going on of the Seven of Wands here and the Devil. So I think that's really interesting. You could also look at this particular pairing in more of a sense of, you know, here's where I'm at, and this is how it's affecting me on an internal level and as well as on an external level. So I think that this, the Robin Wood for me works, it's very versatile in that sense. And so it works really well as being, finding that balance between, we'll do one more. So again, we have the Goddess Temple in the middle paired with the Robin Wood Tarot. So the last pairing that I want to talk about is the other new deck in my collection, which is the Witch's Wisdom Tarot. And I thought this might be another one where the artwork would be really compatible. And as you can see here at the cards on my table, they are definitely cohesive in terms of their artwork. Again, of course, they are by different artists, but I think they do work quite beautifully together. But both of these decks have a very kind of grounded down in the earth energy to them, even though the Goddess Temple is, of course, a deck of, you know, goddess energy and tapping into that. It is very much about tapping into it in the real world, in a sense of how we can use that energy for our personal transformation, where the Witch's Tarot is kind of along the similar lines of about, you know, how can we tap into that energy and to cultivate personal change and transformation and growth within us as well as outside of us. And I felt like these two decks would really have some cohesive energies and would work really well together. So here we have the Shapeshifter with the Three of Water and the Ten of Earth. So I think these two would pair really well together in terms of, again, just using the Goddess Temple as just a regular oracle deck and not necessarily dividing it into its suits. I think they do look quite beautiful together. The color palette is quite lovely between these two decks. So here we have the Vision with the Four of Water and the Witch of Earth. Beautiful. So again, I think this is another pairing that you could get some very deep and transformative messages from. I feel like both decks would have a lot to offer. I could also see using the Goddess Temple as kind of in its structure to lay a foundation for a reading and then laying the Witch's Wisdom Tarot over the top of it to really dive deep into each of those areas of focus, into each of the spokes of the wheel, the aspects of the divine, as well as those elements in the cauldron of transformation. I think that would be beautiful. Here we have the Selkie between the world and love. Okay, last one, because what a gorgeous note to end on. We have the Green Man, the Wise, between the Seven of Water and the Eight of Air. So again, that's the Goddess Temple paired with the Witch's Wisdom Tarot. So the Goddess Temple was really a deck that kind of surprised me. I didn't really, again, research it at all before I bought it. It was kind of an impulse purchase, but I really do love that it sort of follows that Avalonian path to transformation. I don't know that you would really necessarily need to follow an Avalonian path because I personally don't, but I do pull many of those elements into my personal growth work. I just wouldn't really consider myself like a full member of that tradition or anything, but I definitely like to study about the Avalonian tradition. I do have a practice that kind of does fall in line with it, but is kind of my own making and doesn't necessarily follow any one real path or another. But what I really like is the idea of pulling in the goddesses with the seasonal wheel. I love the idea of having those balancing masculine and feminine energies. And I like having those cards for the path of transformation. So I think that this deck has a lot to offer. There's not a ton of cards to it, but I really do think that it has a lot to offer. And I think that there is quite a bit that you could do with it, and quite a few different ways that you could actually incorporate it into multiple kinds of readings, as well as, you know, just using it as a standard oracle. You could also definitely pull it in and pull out cards intentionally to manifest certain things, or to use them as altar cards or affirmation cards, or whatever element that you would like to tap into or work on. So I'm quite pleased to have stumbled upon this little deck. I am really enjoying getting to know it, and I'm definitely looking forward to incorporating it into some of my larger readings. I do intend to use it not only just as a basic oracle, as you saw me do pairing it with tarot, but also to incorporate it into some of the more magical and seasonal work that I do. I think it's going to work beautifully for that as well. So I would love to know if you have this deck, or how you find working with it, or is it something that you might be interested in working with? I would love to know your thoughts on it. So please feel free to share with me in the comments below. Thank you for joining me today. You'll find links for everything featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.